Well, hello. We're back on the Take Three podcast presented by IU Sports Media. This week, after the 1 week Turkey Day hiatus, we bring on former IU student, now graduate, Brandon Schaff. Brandon, how are you, man? Long time no see.
Yeah, Jordan, man, it's good to hear your voice. I'm coming
Thank
at
you.
you from Chicago right
Good to hear
now.
your voice.
I know. It's so weird. I feel like when I graduated, which was graduated, right? Virtual, it feels like an
I
eternity
know.
ago already. And it was really just back in May. So
I know. So, what have you been up to since I guess May? You mentioned the virtual graduation, and
right.
what have you done to keep busy, and what are you up to right now?
Yeah, so I'm at grad school at Northwestern now. So I'm in like a 1 year journalism program where I'm basically just continuing, where I left off at IU. And it's been crazy. It's been very
Mm.
busy. It's different because we're on the quarter system compared to, the semesters. So it's basically the same idea. It's like almost the same amount of time, but it's just super quick pace, very quick turnaround with a lot of stuff. But it's been very immersive, which I really appreciate. And it's given me a lot of opportunities, despite the fact that there isn't really a lot of live sports for us to cover as students. I've still been able to go out in the city because my program is literally in downtown Chicago as opposed to being on the Evanston campus, because
Hmm.
that's where the grad program is. And that's where a lot of grad programs are at Northwestern around their downtown campus. And it's been really cool. It's been a lot of fun. I've been able to cover a lot of sports, of course, which we'll get into, while also keeping up with what's been going on with the Hoosiers this year because it's been fun.
Yeah. So are you, I know, what is J.A. Donde, the sports media director there, kind of like the
Yeah.
Flavio here?
Yep,
So
ESPN's very own.
that's pretty cool. So how's
Yep.
your interaction with him, and what's been the experience like there?
Well, he's really cool. For anybody who doesn't know him, he used to be on Around the Horn. He still goes on there, every once in a while, but he was a regular guy for a long time.
Mhm.
He's a Northwestern Medill alum as well. So he went back a few years ago and took over the grad program. Well, he's in charge of a lot of things within Medill, but he's in charge of my program specifically um, at the grad level. And I'm specifically in the sports journalism specialization, but my actual major is just journalism. And so he's in charge of all the people that are in my cohort for the specialization. And so I took a class with him that was kind of like sports media and society at IU. Like it was very similar to that. And it was basically, just learning about the intersection of sports and American culture and things like that. And I mean, that's obviously, one of the biggest things because sports is American culture, so
Yeah.
there's a lot to cover. And, it really helped to kind of get perspective from somebody who's been working in the industry for such a long time. And, I'm looking forward to learning more from him as the year goes along.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up on, sports are American culture. I couldn't agree more with that. There was a quote from Sean Doolittle, he's a pitcher for the Nationals, that he said this year. He said that sports are a reward, or the reward of a functioning society. And I really do agree with that, because sports are so intertwined with our culture. And, now, I mean, we were to a point, Brandon, where we had, NBA and MLB postseason and the NBA postseason and NFL crossover. And it's like, whoa, like everything at once. It was pretty crazy.
It
For
was,
that to happen.
having all of them at the same time was awesome. But I really struggled with like deciding what to watch, like what
Mm.
to pay attention to. And it definitely makes sense why they have everything scheduled out the way it does. Obviously, weather's a factor for the sports that are played outside, like you're not going to be playing baseball in the middle of December. But it was just interesting, seeing like the NBA, crossing over into, a later part of the NFL season as opposed to just like the preseason, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see how when everything came back, you could actually, really feel the difference that sports brought into our lives.
Yeah. Is your program in Northwestern, is it a 1 year track, or how many years is the plan?
Yeah, it's just 1 year, so I don't have to be in school forever. I just get, a nice little one and done. Kind of like, it's so funny because
One and done.
one and done.
You're the next Zion Williamson of sports media, Brandon.
Seriously, and a really good comparison is actually Peyton Ramsey because he was at IU and then he transferred to Northwestern, and here I am too, following in his footsteps.
Yeah, how about that? We don't have Northwestern on the agenda, but I guess quick. What's your thoughts? That's a magical season they're having under Peyton Ramsey there and Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah, it's amazing. Pat is, Fitzgerald is so similar to Tom Allen. It's not even funny. Like I love the enthusiasm that they both bring. Like they have like almost identical coaching styles. They're both very defensive minded, and that's obviously helped out a lot because both Indiana and Northwestern have been incredible defensive teams this year. Northwestern has been in the top 10 nationally, in defensive, like overall defense. So it's been crazy. And I'm so happy that they're at the top of that division because now, just because of technicalities with games getting canceled, like, Northwestern has had a great season, but now they will be in that Big Ten championship game. So that's going to be really exciting to see.
Yeah, and who they will see, whether it be Ohio State or Indiana, that's yet to be seen. We'll get to that in a little bit. But Brandon, I see you put on the IU hat for today. That was a good choice.
Oh yes,
all the listeners out there, I'm sure will appreciate that. So thank you very much. But yeah, good catching up, and we'll move into the Maui Invitational a little bit. Indiana, 3 performances, 3. Almost, I would say very different. I'd say game 1 and game 3 for them. You see we have some Providence footage here, but it was really a tale of 3 different games kind of for Indiana. Game 1, it was kind of the Race Thompson show, career high 22 points, 13 rebounds. Armand Franklin, you see him missed a shot here, but he had a really solid performance against Providence. And then Texas, they fell pretty flat. They felt pretty flat.
Yeah, they kind of looked out of sorts just from the beginning in the Texas game. And I was listening to Archie Miller afterward kind of talk about everything. And the first question that they asked him was, did you just feel flat? Like, did you guys just not bring it like when you first started? And, he was honest about it. I mean, he said that they just did not really feel like they were in that game from the get-go. And, you're showing the Providence highlights right now. Like, that was the exact opposite. Like, as much as Bill Walton drives me crazy with his commentary, at least this game, they were definitely pointing out the fact that Indiana, the way that they were playing on both ends of the court, I mean, the defense was awesome. Like you see some of these possessions here where these young guys, and man, I'm sure we'll talk about, just how different the recruiting has been, this year with people like Christian Lander coming in, and like you got to feel excited. Because Trace Jackson Davis is clearly that, as he runs down there, like he's clearly the best player on the team. And yet everybody else knows that they have a very important role where they can really complement that inside play. And also Race Thompson there too, just looking like you said, he's looking like a beast now. And it's amazing.
It is. I think it was, I was talking to Anna, producer for this, before the show here, and we're talking about how the announcers were like really like, whoa, Race Thompson is like bulked up, like he's a new man. And they're right. I mean, he really has put a lot of muscle on in the off season, and they were talking about, if you went in a Cook Hall, the practice facility or whatever during the summer, everyone was just raving about how much better Race Thompson has improved from his sophomore year to this year. And I really do. I agree early on here with that assessment.
Yeah, I mean, in that Providence game, I'm looking at the stat sheet. He had 22 points and 13 rebounds. I didn't even realize that it was that good. Like it passes the eye test, but when you really look at the production that they're getting, I mean, it's not like Providence is gonna, blow your drawers off in the first place, right? Like that was a game that Indiana was expected to win. But the fact that they did that well, I mean, they won by 21 points, so it's like, all right, that put a little respect there because how much parity there is in the Big Ten this year. At the top that some of the best teams in the country this year. I mean, teams like Michigan State who just beat Duke, right? Like when Indiana is going to have to go against teams like that and Illinois, right? That's going to be rough. That is going to be hard. So these are the games that Indiana really needed. And that was another thing, too, that Archie said after the Texas game. He said that this is a game that these guys needed because they needed somebody to kind of knock them on their butts and say, all right, wake up. This is for real. Not every team is going to be like Providence. It's going to be like number 17 Texas, especially once they get to Big Ten play, and it's going to be even worse, harder than that. So they needed to step up, and they did against Stanford, and that is a good point to go forward.
Yeah, and you brought up a lot of great points about that Texas game. It was kind of a wake up call. I really do agree with that. The 44 points, I think the lowest under an Archie Miller team, and I think they shot 23% from the field, which is like their worst in a decade or something like that.
Yep, worst in 10 years.
Pretty bad. But I give credit to Indiana and Archie Miller for responding the following day. In their game against Stanford, which was, again, a nice performance, really led by Trace Jackson Davis, 31 points, his career high. So, Trace Jackson early on, I think it's really has shown that, he's going to be the focal point of the offense this year. They're going to feed him the ball inside, and he's going to get to the free throw line a lot. Actually, he's going to get to the line more than probably most of his teammates because he's physical inside, he draws contact, and he's got to start making more than he misses, because early on, I think that's been kind of a point that he needs to probably work on is his free throw shooting, and also his mid-range shot, which I think is something that he's trying out a little bit more this year. But I think that's something that he is working on to add to his game as he looks to eventually move into an NBA career. So, what have you learned about Indiana from that performance in the Maui Invitational? Like I said, one dud, two nice performances.
Yeah, I'd say definitely the Texas game stood out as one that really proved how much this team still needs to do going into Big Ten play. Like I was saying, I really think that they have to figure out what went wrong there, and they have to kind of build around the performance that they got from Trace Jackson Davis. So in the next game against Stanford, because you have that career high, and you still see how much he's getting to the line, which is great. Mm-hmm. But the shooting does need to improve, as always. I don't know how over the past few years, even with the good recruiting, for whatever reason, it just seems like it's brick central every single game, yes. And I wonder, if that's not something that is focused on much in practices with Archie, and I remember last year being very frustrated with that too, because, even though they kind of put together a nice stretch at the end there where it looked like they were going to make the tournament and everything was kind of coming together, they were still going against teams where it was very winnable if they had just shot the ball just a little bit better from outside, and they could get inside. And that's exactly what they brought Trace there for. And that's exactly what you expect from him. But even for somebody like Davis, who's going to try to make it to the NBA, you can't just do everything inside. You have to develop a jump shot even as a big man, So that's the thing. And, 31 points, majority of which for him come from inside the paint. But it's exciting to see, the development. And like we talked about with these recruits, it's going to be really cool, to see what they're able to do. Even Trey Galloway, he's supposed to be a really good shooter. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
I would say Galloway has been the most impressive freshman to this point in the season.
Definitely.
I think. I mean, Christian Lander is still I think he's just slowly kind of trying to get comfortable out there. I mean, you see him shooting a lot, taking a couple of shots. He misses, and I watched the bench's reaction, Archie nodding his head, like not really loving the shot selection. But Trey Galloway has really given a nice effort. And Anthony Leo also hasn't really come on yet. He's supposed to be that sharpshooter and potentially, something that Indiana really will need down the stretch. But Rob Finney, I think, has probably been their best shooter that I have seen out there. I mean, you saw against Providence, he was making good shots. And Stanford, again, nobody was making shots against Texas, but that's kind of a throwaway, I guess, when you look at this 3-game sample size here. So, I think a lot to work on for Indiana. When they play a team like Iowa, though, where their offensive efficiency is through the roof, you have a guy like Luka Garza, who's probably going to be the Wooden Award winner, college basketball's best player. You have a guy like Jordan Bohannon, who's the shooter he is, back for his 12th season, it feels like.
Yes.
They're going to be tough to beat. And a team like Wisconsin as well, with Micah Potter up there, and the guys that they have as well will be a challenge, I think. So, Yeah, I mean they play good defense, but when you come up with against a team that can really score the ball, I mean you're watching. I mean outside the Big Ten, but I mean I've been watching Gonzaga play. Jalen Suggs, boy, does he look good?
Wow.
Or a guy like or a team like Baylor as well, who is just really the depth across the chart is really good with Scott Drew's team. I mean there's a lot of really talented teams that maybe they meet in the tournament as like an 8 seed, and I don't know how they'd match up, but still a long way to go, and really not a whole lot of cupcakes on the schedule. You had Tennessee Tech in the opener, you have North Alabama, I believe, before they start Big Ten play, and on December 9th, on December 9th here, you see they play Florida State on the road in Tallahassee in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. That's their next game, so not a whole lot. It's really you're just getting thrown right into the fire here in Big Ten play. Only six games, I believe, outside the conference before they get started, or 7. I think they play Butler in the Crossroads Classic as well.
Yeah, they do, and it's going to be an interesting schedule. Before they get to Big Ten play later this month against Northwestern too. That'll be a fun one. I'm excited to. It was funny because last year I watched that game. I went with my dad to Assembly Hall over winter break. And it actually, it's weird because it winds up being one of the last games that I got to see there. It was going to be that way either way because I was a senior, but like the season got cut short. So there were only a certain amount of games after that I got to see. But I remember going to that and just being like, wow, this is one of the schools that I just applied to. This could potentially be both of my schools going head to head now. So it's cool to see that and that matchup. But they Northwestern also just played a really good game. They just won by like 40 points in their season opener too. So that's going to be interesting for the Hoosiers to see what they're able to do, especially being at home. It's really nice. Even without the fans there, it seems like they're still going with the usual traditions. They're still playing the hype videos at the beginning. I've been watching the reporter coverage of just how things have been in the hall. And I feel like they're really comfortable, being there now as they always are, right? But it's definitely a difference not having them there. And the Crossroad Classics is going to be really nice too against Butler this year. I feel like that'll be, a really nice sense of familiarity for people, as they try to navigate this season. Everybody will, we know how exciting those matchups are, whether it's Butler or Notre Dame. Those have been some of the most fun games over the past few years. And we know about Rob Phinissee's big shot in that game a couple years ago. So that really brings back some great memories too.
Yeah, definitely. Was it Rob or was it Armand? I'm trying to think.
There was one against there was one where someone was in the paint against Notre Dame, the one
Armand Franklin hit the shot against Notre Dame to win. I think it was at the buzzer.
There was another one where Rob Phinisee hit it from like almost the logo. You remember that long 3?
Yeah. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. It was one of them.
I don't remember which game that was exactly. I thought it was the Crossroad Classics because I was at home watching it, so that I think that's why. But regardless, just great games, phenomenal games there.
Sure. And before the season, I kind of had this thought that I think Indiana's best lineup is when they play Trace Jackson Davis at the 5, Race Thompson at the 4, and then go small, where they have 3-guard set of Durham, Phinisee, and they're choosing of Lander or Archie's been going with Armand Franklin there in the 3-guard spot, just because I think the youth and there wasn't enough really time to see the freshmen get their feet wet out there before the season started. But as the time develops, you saw, I think Trey Galloway got a start, or he's starting to kind of mix in some of his freshmen now. To be honest with you, Brandon, I mean, I kind of am forgetting that Joey Brunk's on the team. I mean, I know he's hurt, but like, I don't know. To me, his place on this team is a reserve to Trace Jackson Davis on the bench. I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, where do you? I don't know. I mean, what's Indiana's best lineup, and where do you see Joey Brunk, coming into the mix when he's healthy?
Well, if you're looking at the front court, that combination of Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson has been amazing so far. Yeah. Like, you look at what Race did against Providence, and then you look at what Trace did against Stanford. If you can get that kind of production both times, and Race Thompson had a great game against Stanford too. So, I mean, he almost had a double-double. He had 15 points, 8 rebounds. So that really is a promising sign. And the physicality, it seems like every single game now they're showing those like before and after pictures of Race. He's just looking like seriously, he looks like he could run through a wall now, and it runs in the family. He's got a family of athletes across the board, but that is best. I think I really don't see Joey coming in and taking those starting lineup spots from them. I bless you.
Thank you.
No problem. But no, I don't see that changing. And I obviously think Rob Finney needs to be starting, at guard every single game. He's proven that that's his thing. That's his spot. And then, you have some flexibility with Franklin and Galloway, the ones who started at the other two positions against Stanford. I feel like you could try to insert Jerome Hunter in there more.
Jerome Hunter again.
He showed some promise. Last year he really looked like he was getting used to playing, at a Division I level again, or I guess for the first time. And now he's really looking like he's actually comfortable doing that. And, I think Anthony Leal is another guy who definitely has some great potential, as a guard who can shoot. I think he could definitely, do some damage too. But I think so far I'm pretty happy with the way they have it. And like we said, Trey Galloway, the most impressive of the freshmen, he's already started against Stanford. So if Archie wants to keep that going, they're just going to have to figure out what they're going to do without Al available, without Al Durham. And that's one of your leaders. That's one of the guys, kind of the glue for the team. I don't know if they said what the timeline is for his return, but that'll be interesting to see who's able to step up. And it's kind of trial by fire at this point.
Well, he was warming up against Stanford after, he had the bad ankle turn against Texas, but it was encouraging to see him out there the next day, and shoot around. So I don't know. They do have a layoff. They don't play until this coming Wednesday against Florida State. So maybe that's enough time for the ankle. Maybe it's not. But I don't know. I mean, I think for Archie Miller, you have a luxury at the guard position where you're not really short there, where you could throw out Rob Finney or Christian Land or Armand Franklin, who had a nice Maui Invitational. Maybe Anthony Leal a little bit. So you can mix in guards and small forwards into that. Jerome Hunter, depending on how he looks, and maybe go from there. But yeah, Indiana 3-1 to this point in the young season. So we'll have to follow them along, and big matchup against heavyweight matchup, should I say, against Northwestern.
Before we move on from Maui, I want to get your take on this. So we know Zaire Williams, right? He's this big, coveted. He's going to be this one and done, potential lottery pick. They held him to 4 points in that matchup. I just wonder, what do you think, what was the reason, how were they able to, kind of minimize the threat there? Because I thought he was going to run all over the Hoosiers.
Yeah, he also had a kind of an up and down Maui Invitational where he had I forget who they played against North Carolina the game before. I think he was he had a pretty good performance in that one. So yeah, I mean, he's young. Have to keep in mind. I mean, he's a freshman, and I don't know. I mean, the inconsistencies will be there, but got to give credit to Indiana where credit's due. I mean, they did play good defense. I mean, Archie Miller's teams are known for playing good defense. I mean, they did lose to Texas, but they did only hold Texas to 66 points. I mean, again, you got to hope that your team can about score around that much to keep up with them. And 44 points is not going to win you very many games, if any. So yeah, I mean, I think it was just a kind of a combination of just an off shooting day for Zaire, plus he kind of just being the young freshman that he is. I mean, only a couple of games for him as well. I mean, we've seen it with Christian Lander as well, where he's just struggled from the field, a 5-star recruit that he was as well, not really figure it out just yet. But Zaire Williams, really good. Yeah, I could see him being one and done, but he's got to get a little more consistent, but he's got time for that.
Yeah.
And I like that De Silva guy as well for Stanford as well.
Yeah.
The forward that plays kind of inside.
He was really good.
I like what I saw from Stanford. So I think that's a nice win they got. Providence, we'll see. Stanford could be a nice win. Who knows? But moving ahead, though, from the basketball court to the gridiron, you got an interesting conundrum here at quarterback for Indiana. So Michael Penix Jr., you see on bottom screen, tore his ACL against Maryland. Tough kind of end of the season for him. Third straight year now, Brandon, where he's had a season-ending injury his freshman year, tore his ACL on that same right knee. Last year, they had to have he had to have surgery to repair his right sternoclavicular joint in his shoulder. And then this year, again, the torn ACL. So he just can't seem to stay healthy. It's unfortunate. And, as a fan watching Penix play, I'm like, he just seemed glued to the pocket. He wouldn't move a lot. Like, all right, like, if you just step up in the pocket or have a little bit of awareness, you could slide down, get, 5 or 6 yards, whatever, make a positive play out of it. But yeah, you can see now it's very apparent, as we know why now is, he had a 21-yard rush in a run, his second highest run of the season or longest run of the season, and he tore his ACL, stumbling out of bounds. So yeah, kind of unfortunate luck there for Penix.
I know. And it's frustrating because that the amount of promise that this season has, this will take a lot of the air out of the ball, metaphorically. And it's okay because that the team is ready. They're prepared. I mean, when they lost, what's Tom Allen's son name? Is it Thomas Allen?
Thomas Allen. Yeah,
Thomas
easy to remember, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I know. This is perfect. So, yeah, when you get Thomas Allen Jr., going out with that pretty catastrophic injury for him, he's out for the season. And that's, it's hard because these are guys that, they've been working to be in this position. And, Penix has been somebody who I don't know if everybody really was on the bandwagon, so to speak, when he first, took over for Peyton Ramsey. I think people were like, okay, like he's good. He's got some potential. I'm glad we were able to flip him, from staying in Florida and able to get him to come up to Indiana. I think that was really, exciting. And I always love the dual threat. That's obviously the direction that, college football has been doing for a long time, but even the NFL now, it's the way the game is played now. So Mike Penix has been the right guy for that position. And we've been really fortunate. I was gushing, at Mike Penix when he took over just because of his ability to run the ball. And I thought it was great, the amount of national attention that he was getting this year because of how high Indiana was ranked. It still kind of blows my mind to hear Indiana talked about in a football sense as a legitimate team. And they are this year. And I don't think that Penix, not being able to continue the season means that Indiana's not still a legitimate team, because it's not going to take away from the defense. You're not losing Ty Freifogel, who's been one of the best receivers, not just in the Big Ten, but the whole NCAA this year. Everybody's still there, and you still have Stevie Scott. Stevie Scott has been averaging like at least 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns a game. So you got to be happy with what you've seen. And, somebody like Tuttle, yes, he was a 4-star recruit. Yes, he transfers from Utah. He definitely has a lot of the same potential, at least from a leadership perspective, that Penix had. But you're going to miss that dual threat ability. And it's not to say that Tuttle can't run the ball, but we all know what Penix brings. He forces the defense to pay attention, to that at any time. You don't know what he's going to do, and he gets those extra yards, and that makes the difference.
I agree. When you lose a quarterback like Penix, who, threw for 491 passing yards against Ohio State, who, that's DBU. That's defensive back U. I mean, look at all the cornerbacks and talent they bring out of there. Granted, the secondary isn't great this year. And in my opinion, that's why Ohio State needs more games to show that their defense is not, they look terrible against a good team like Indiana. They haven't played good offenses. That was their best offense they played, gave up 35 points and almost 500 passing yards. You can't do that. That's not a top 4 team in my mind, but they need time to prove that. But yeah, you miss a guy like Penix. You saw, of course, the reach against Penn State, and then nice performance against Michigan as well, dominant from really start to finish. But I don't think they're going to miss much of a beat, which kind of leads into my next question, kind of what they're going to miss with Penix, but gain. Yeah, of course, with Michael Penix, you're going to lose that experience, right? I mean, he's been the guy. But with that being said, immediate availability this week, Jack Tuttle and Thomas Allen, or sorry, not Tom Allen, and Nick Sheridan, the offensive coordinator, have all said, look, Tuttle takes snaps and reps and prepares like he is the starter every week, waiting for the chance, which is here now. And, that's something similar what we saw with your guy now, Peyton Ramsey,
right?
When he was a backup, kind of took the backseat to Michael Penix last year. Then he came in, and really that preparation really allowed him to succeed. The big win against Nebraska, big games down the stretch to lead Indiana to that bowl game, and then ultimately lose, in a heartbreaker. But Peyton Ramsey really, I think, gave Indiana fans above and beyond. I mean, as far as a backup goes, you're showing now. I mean, he's capable of leading Northwestern all the way up to the number 8 team in the country at starting quarterback. I mean, so yeah, I mean that was Indiana's second guy, and now I think what's going to be amazing, Jack Tuttle, who was with the program last year, I think he's really going to show the committee and the country something over the course of the last. He's got 2 more starts, and then against Wisconsin, and then he would start against Purdue if all goes well, and then they'd have that 9th game, which you're not sure what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and it's really important for the culture of the team that that everybody is always ready, that next man up attitude. I think that's something that I've been really impressed with the top programs like Alabama and Clemson. Every single year, you always hear about, if someone goes down, the next guy is just as ready as the first guy. And I think that's exactly what Tom has brought to Indiana over the past few years. He really is like, okay, like we're all in this. Like, I want everybody, everybody who's starting is going to start, but I want everybody to approach this like if somebody goes down, we're not going to miss a beat. And it's exactly like you said. And fortunately, with Indiana, with the quarterback situation in Indiana, it's exactly the way that it's been even since my freshman year with Richard Lego. Because you had Richard, and he was what he was. But then Peyton Ramsey, he was always ready. He was always on the cusp of, being ready to take over at that position. And eventually he did. And everybody was really happy. And they're like, okay. And then same thing happens as Ramsey kind of declines. Penix is there. He starts, Penix starts to get some reps in, starts coming into the game. And then it's the next man up. Penix takes over. And then while Penix is playing and he's looking like the best quarterback that Indiana's had in quite some time, then you have somebody like Tuttle who transfers in and, is ready, even though, last year he was a 3rd string guy, right? So, he knew that the chances of him actually playing were pretty minimal, and yet he was ready. He's been ready for this. He's been there every single year, and this is exactly why he came here. This is why he transferred. It's exactly what you expect from somebody who transfers, that they want to be able to play, and they want to be able to play on the biggest stage. And that's exactly the opportunity that they're going to get here, is what Tuttle's going to get, because if he's going to be playing, he's going to be, and if Indiana is going to make the Big Ten championship game, you want to talk about trial by fire. I mean, that is the best experience you could possibly get.
Yeah, for real. I think that Indiana, compared to most teams in the Big Ten, really fortunate with the depth at their quarterback position. And the thing is, I think the advantage for Indiana is that really there's not much footage of Jack Tuttle out there for Wisconsin to scout and look. So they really don't know. I mean, the game plan, that's why, the line for Wisconsin, the Vegas has Wisconsin by 14 points favored by this week. And I think that's too high in my opinion, just because I think bettors don't know really what you're going to get out of Jack Tuttle. But I don't know if people realize that Michael Penix and Jack Tuttle were in the same recruiting class, 2018. And Rivals had Penix rated as the 14th best pro-style quarterback. And Jack Tuttle was 9 spots in front of him at the number 5 spot in the pro style quarterback rankings in the same year. So he was actually rated better coming into college than Michael Penix was.
Wow.
And you keep in mind that this is the same class that features Trevor Lawrence, at the top. So, there's a lot to be said there, but.
And Justin Fields. Don't forget that.
And Justin Fields, of course. Yeah. You have a guy like Tuttle, and the coaches really rave about his arm strength. So I'm excited to see that out of him, as well as mobility. I think we're going to see Tuttle move out of the pocket a little bit, maybe run a couple bootlegs. Something where we saw Peyton, like kind of how we see Peyton Ramsey. I think Tuttle is going to be. I think he's going to be a similar play style to Peyton Ramsey, but with a stronger arm.
Yes.
And less experience. And I think you combine all that together, and that gives you Jack Tuttle. So we'll see what we have. I mean, he's got the weapons, right? You mentioned it. They still have Ty Freifogel. They still have Whop Phillier, who, he's kind of been an afterthought this year. I mean, he's still really good. He's had an 11 catch game and 100 receiving yard game this year. So don't sleep on him. Peyton Hendershot really has never really gotten into a rhythm yet this year, and which is kind of scary to think about, because he was Indiana's probably best receiving weapon last year, right up there with Whop Phillier. And then Miles Marshall as well, who you saw had pretty much the lone receiving highlight against Maryland last week, that offside 37-yard pass that Penix just kind of looped up there and he caught.
Yeah, I was surprised. It's funny you mentioned Peyton Hendershot, and last year, I was kind of raving about him because I was like, you know what, this is a dude who really looks like, he has found those hands. He really was. He was great. He's always been a big guy, so he's been able to block for people, and he's been able to be in the right spot at the right time. But last year, I mean, the numbers were really starting to back it up. I mean, between him and Whop, it was looking like that was it. Like these were going to be your guys. And it seemed like, whether it was Ramsey or Penix, that it was a really comfortable target, kind of like a Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, kind of dynamic, where it just felt like, if you need a reliable tight end in the end zone, he was looking like a pretty good target. Now, it didn't last this year, like you said, because he doesn't really look like, whether that is, just because he hasn't been there as much, because of the issues that happen between the seasons, or if he just, hasn't just had as many opportunities, as he had before, because someone like Freifogel has just stepped up as much as he has. And Ty has been crazy. And like you said, Whop Phillier being kind of the afterthought, it's a pretty great afterthought. I mean, he's still definitely putting up some great receiving yards too. He's almost up there, or at least at the beginning of the year, he was up there with Ty. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. So college football playoff rankings came out on Tuesday, like they usually do. Indiana stayed at the number 12 spot, didn't move up. I asked some of the players about it, like, hey, do you pay attention to this kind of thing? And they said they really don't. They're just eyes on Wisconsin. They look ahead, but I don't know. I mean, I number 12, they didn't move up. 27-11 win. I thought it was a pretty dominant performance against Maryland. I think Maryland scored late too, so it was really like a blowout. And you lose Michael Penix, so maybe that's why the committee's like, all right, let's see how they look with Jack Tuttle, a different quarterback under center, before we maybe move them up. Maybe it's because it was Maryland. I don't know. But something interesting that I was, looking at before you came on, Indiana is kind of getting to a spot here, similar to last year, where they might not have a win against a team above 500. It might happen again, Brandon.
Oh my gosh.
Penn State is 1-5. Michigan is 2-4. They lost to Ohio State, so obviously you don't count that. They beat Maryland, but Maryland's 500. They're 2-2. And who am I forgetting? Michigan State. Michigan State is 2-3, I think.
Yes.
So you're looking here, and it's not Indiana's fault. I mean, they're winning the games to win.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? Like, I mean, is this really the same thing where they can't get a win against a team with a winning record? Like, is that really going to happen again? It might. Wisconsin is 2-1. So say they beat Wisconsin, okay? Then Wisconsin goes to 2-2. I mean, and then they maybe lose. Then they have a game against Iowa on the road. So then Wisconsin could actually finish the season under 500 or at 500 potentially.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think, and I will not take this personally, but do you think that IU is better than Northwestern right now?
I do. I think Northwestern's defense is right on par with Indiana's. I mean, I think it's impressive what Northwestern did holding Wisconsin to 7 points. I'm curious
That's
to
the
see.
point.
I'm curious to see this, Brandon. I mean, obviously Indiana will play Wisconsin. How will their defense stack up against the Badgers? Yeah, I mean, I would like to see Northwestern against a team like Ohio State, right, which is the the cream of the crop there in the Big Ten. And Indiana, only lost by 7 points and had the ball and could have gone down the field to tie the game potentially, but obviously they didn't.
Yes.
But they were that close. I don't know if Northwestern has the firepower like Indiana to do that. I was watching their game against Michigan State, a team that Indiana did shut out 24-0 and win. So you also look at that, and I don't know. You can't really lose that game if you're Northwestern, especially if you just came off a big win against Wisconsin. Have they played Iowa? Has Northwestern played Iowa?
I'm trying to remember I don't think they have yet.
Okay. So Iowa again, I would say is a good opponent. So we'll see how they fare. But I do think they're above. I think their defense puts them in the position that they are. You can't really rely on Peyton Ramsey to do like what Penix did and almost win you a game where he threw for 500 yards. I don't think you're going to have something like, you can't really expect that out of Peyton Ramsey, but you can expect him to make the throws, make the plays you need to kind of go down the field and potentially win you a game. But it can't really be all on Peyton Ramsey. That's not the quarterback he is. I do think Indiana overall, I'd say maybe Northwestern has a slight edge in defense, but I mean, it's hard to say that. Indiana leads the nation in interceptions with 16, the whole country.
That's true. Yeah,
and
I know.
The amazing thing is they haven't even returned one for a touchdown yet. They've had 16 interceptions, none of which they've been able to capitalize on.
I know. And unfortunately, sometimes they turn the ball over right away after they get these defensive takeaways. So, they're good. Like, they're good at getting them, but whether or not they're able to turn them into points, that's the big difference. And
yeah.
It's been really good. It's really promising to see, what a lot of these guys have been able to do. And I'm really happy with the defensive production. I think that they could really benefit from that, especially against a team like Wisconsin. I was looking at the schedule. So Northwestern did play Iowa.
Okay.
They beat Iowa by like 1 point. And and against Wisconsin, it's another one where they were able to be, low scoring games. That's going to be the key. I'm just kind of looking at the way that the Wildcats beat Wisconsin as kind of the blueprint for what IU has to do. And, they held Wisconsin to a touchdown. I mean, it was a 7-point game, where you have Mertz, their quarterback, had 3 interceptions in that game. All right. So that, I mean, if you can get him out of his rhythm, that's going to be good. That is going to be good news for Indiana.
Yeah. And Indiana has done a great job at forcing interceptions. Talia Tagovailoa, I think he had 2. But before that, Justin Fields threw 3 interceptions, who threw 3 all of last season. And then you have, the Michigan quarterback, Joe Milton at the time, threw a couple interceptions. So, yeah, the defense has done a great job in getting takeaways. The secondary is the best, probably the best I'd say a top 3 secondary in the nation, if not the best. I mean, the numbers certainly show they're getting the turnovers. But then you also look at the defensive line production. Indiana leads the Big Ten in sacks with 20 on the season. With Jerome Johnson's really good. I think he's going to be a nice pickup for an NFL team when he moves on at some point.
And Micah McFadden too.
McFadden has three sacks and a handful of interceptions as well. I think it would be a competitive game if Indiana matched up against Northwestern. I think it would be a low-scoring game, but I do think Indiana is the better team. I mean, at least offensively, I would give them the edge. Defense, I would say, at worst, they're even. Maybe Northwestern maybe has a slight edge, but yeah, it would be pretty close. But number 12 for Indiana, so they are I think they're the second highest Big Ten rated team. Of course, Ohio State at the number 4 spot. Wisconsin at 16, who we'll get into here next. Indiana travels up to play at Camp Randall Stadium in Madison on Saturday, 3:30 p.m. kickoff on ABC. Should be an interesting one. You see we have some highlights here from last week, but Yeah, Stevie Scott, they're going to have to give him the ball, and they're going to have success running the ball. Something that I have noticed is that Stevie Scott struggles running the ball well against ranked teams, like in the Big Ten. Penn State didn't have a fantastic game when they played them. Ohio State, obviously, they had 7 rushing attempts for 6 yards. That's it. Like they could not run the ball. And again, I mean, when you play good teams, you got to be able to have success running the ball as well. You see the safety by DK Bonham, who fantastic. That was his first safety of his career. He's a spectacular athlete. He's going to be a playmaker for Indiana for years to come. And then here you have the injury to Penix, which you hate to see this, but
yeah.
And then Jack Tuttle coming in. You see the Stevie Scott touchdown, and I don't know if they're okay. But then Jack Tuttle comes right in and throws the strike to Peyton Hendershot. First throw of the game for him. The 2-point conversion. That was impressive. And yeah, then they roll to the 27-11 win. But yeah, Indiana's, I think I predict that this is going to be a low scoring game. I think I had it at 24-14 Indiana. I think they're going to win this game. Just because Wisconsin, to be honest with you, Brandon, we don't have a lot on them. They've only played 3 games this season, but the committee has respected them. I mean, you see, they have 2 blowouts where they won like 45-17. Actually, I have their schedule right here. They beat Illinois 45-7 in the opener, if you remember, back on that Friday game against Illinois. Then they had 2 games canceled against Nebraska and Purdue. Then they won in the Big House at Michigan 49-11, and then they lost to Northwestern 2 weeks ago, 17-7, and that's all we got. That's all we got on them. We have 2 really impressive performances, and we have 1 dud. And I think it's more likely that Indiana plays Wisconsin as Northwestern did than they did against like an Illinois or Michigan, who's not very good this year.
Exactly. And, Illinois, and Michigan both. Michigan, very surprising that they really, just have regressed as much as they have. And it's not like Harbaugh hasn't been able to recruit people there, but for whatever reason, the turnaround, just losing these players has been a big problem. And I think you see that at a place like Penn State too. Not that Wisconsin went against Penn State, but that was something that, you could tell that they were missing some of those key pieces, and Indiana was able to take advantage of that at the beginning of the year. And, Wisconsin this year has been getting respect from the committee. So, you have to definitely pay attention to the threat. And, Indiana is going to be on the road too. So if you're going to be in Wisconsin for this ranked matchup, which, this is the Big Ten, there's no easy games ever. And, Maryland was proof of that, because even though Indiana won, pretty soundly, even at the end, they still were able to score. So you're, like you said, I almost feel like it's pretty generous saying that Indiana is going to score over 20 points against them, because even though Indiana has the offensive weapons that they do, and even though it's not like Wisconsin's defense is, say, Ohio State's normally, right, or Northwestern's, or Indiana's, they still have the ability, especially because if you think about their schedule, those games that they got canceled, they could very well be with 1 loss and 4 or 5 wins. I really do. I wouldn't see them losing to Nebraska or Purdue. So, they would be in really good shape right now. And that would be rough for Northwestern too, trying to win that division. It's a good thing that they had that tiebreaker, against them. But definitely nothing to sleep on. But like we said with the interceptions, if they can get the interceptions, that's going to be key. And maybe if they do put up some big points, it's going to be because of those defensive takeaways. If they can get, something like 2 or 3 interceptions like Northwestern was able to, that's a pretty good indicator of what's going to happen.
Yeah, you would think that Indiana at some point they'll be able to break through and take one back for a touchdown. But Jalen Williams last week fumbling the football on the interception return. The week before was Jamar Johnson. So yeah, they've been working on it in practice on they call them takeaway circuits or something like that, where they just kind of work on that, just controlling the football, because in the minds they just a defensive back is just trying to go to the end zone, try to maybe be the hero, make a play. But sometimes it's just good to get out of bounds or get down, and because obviously when you intercept a pass, you're running the opposite direction. So then you have everyone behind you that you can't see that's trying to catch you, as well as the people in front of you, which is, creates a risk for a defender to pop out the football, like what's happened in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And actually, now that I'm looking at this, I can understand why Wisconsin's been able to hold opponents to such low scores, because if you look at their schedule, I mean, they held Illinois to 7, they held Michigan to 11, they held Northwestern even to 17, even though they lost that game. But they have the number 1 ranked total defense in the NCAA. So that's going to take everything that they can throw at them on the offensive end. They're going to need a game from Ty Freifogel again, where he's going to have one of the best games of his career. Seriously, it's not all going to come down to one person, right? They're going to need everybody to show up. Hopefully Stevie can actually get things going. You can't have what happened against Ohio State happen again and expect to win, because that, as great as that game was, and they put up 35 points against a team that's averaging, over 35 points a game, that's going to be a problem if they can't get that running game going, and that is something that Stevie's looked great, so I trust in his ability to really open things up. But, again, playing on the road, they really got it. They got to bring everything they possibly can.
I think there's a level of almost disrespect of Indiana. I mean, even they're the number 12. They're rated higher than Wisconsin is here, yet they're a 2-touchdown, underdog here. And same thing against Ohio State. I mean, as high as they were number 9 in the country, but they were still, a 3-touchdown underdog. And every game, I mean, Indiana is, I think they're 6-0 now against the spread this year. So I think it'll be a close game. But,
Absolutely.
Tom Allen was asked this week, what's Wisconsin's identity? If he could describe it. He said, they're always tough. They're very physical up front. They love to run the football, and they play, hard-nosed, tough defense. I mean, they're a tough team, and they like to run in the trenches, and that's Wisconsin. That's Wisconsin football. I mean, you look at the, they had Monte Ball back in the day, and Jonathan Taylor most recently, and all these, running backs, marquee players that have come in and out of the system. I mean, I almost think Wisconsin is kind of like RBU in the Big Ten. I mean, them and Alabama, which we've seen with, the Derrick Henrys and Trent Richardson and soon to be Najee Harris and, whoever else, the top picks here. There's been tons of running backs out of there. But, yeah, I mean, I think Wisconsin will aim to run the football, and Indiana's got to find a way to stop it, because you saw against Ohio State that did not go well. They gave up over 300 rushing yards, and which meant that Fields really didn't have to do that much. You saw that they changed their game plan completely after that, midway through the second quarter, I would say. They just started to run the ball more. Fields, after that first drive, it was kind of like a fluke, right? 2 passes and a touchdown, nothing. And then all of a sudden they started to stop Fields and throw the interceptions. And then they were like, all right, let's just try starting running the ball. And they did, and they had success. So if you're Indiana, you got to find a way to contain the run game, and that starts with the linebackers and the guys up front, McFadden and DK Bonham, who will see a big role this Saturday as well.
Definitely, yeah. The defense it's gonna be a defensive matchup. I mean, there's no other way to look around it.
Yeah, who do you have winning this game?
I'm gonna give it to Wisconsin, because I think that with Tuttle, I just don't think that it's gonna be enough.
First game on the road. Too much of a risk. First game on the road. Don't know how he's going to look. Yeah, I mean, it's a wild card, right? He could come out and really, turn some heads. But there's just no footage. There's nothing really. I mean, he threw 5 passes against Maryland, or 6 if you count the 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely optimistic about Tuttle. I just remember from watching him last year, just like the little tiny sample size of just like seeing, a little bit of his, I don't even know like how to describe like the potential that he has, because it's just so limited. But like you said, it's very similar to Peyton Ramsey, so if he's somebody, and if you really want to like look for it, you could probably find some of his highlight tapes. I think that was probably, something that could be an indicator of his arm, like we said, being 5 for 5 in the last game. But he really, it's just going to come down to whether, it's going to be a defensive grudge match. And those are hard. Those are hard to predict, especially with somebody. Both quarterbacks really kind of have been out of their, well, Wisconsin's quarterback has been out of his element, at least, they were in the last game 2 weeks ago. So, that's going to be interesting to see what happens. But, if you can get Stevie Scott going, that could be a big difference maker. Like you said, it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be high scoring. I think Wisconsin's going to win just because of the quarterback difference, but I would not be surprised if Indiana is able to upset there, and that would be really fun.
Yeah. Again, it's like weird to call it an upset when they're the higher ranked team here, but that's kind of I think Indiana has really done a good job. I think they love playing the chip on their shoulder game. I think any team in the country would, even if you're Clemson football, who is favored in most games. The chip on your shoulder thing. I mean, it gets them going. It fuels their fire, and you saw it against Penn State, you saw it against Michigan. And they continued to do it and made it a game against Ohio State, like I said. But Stevie Scott, he's your power guy. He's your power back. He's not really going to turn it outside much. He's going to go through he's going to run through the line and pick up 4 or 5 yards, and that's Stevie Scott. Might see him more in the Wildcat. We might not. Don't know. That was a game plan against Maryland. We'll see if they do that at all this Saturday. But Tim Baldwin, a guy who got a lot of playing time against Maryland, rushed for over 100 yards, and he looked really good. He looked pretty electric to me. The running game, I agree, is they need it to be successful for Indiana to have a chance here. But looking ahead here, do you see a path for Indiana to surge into that Big Ten championship? I mean, the scenarios are wild, right? I mean, Ohio State they have to play their next 2 games to qualify, at least at the moment. And then, Indiana, of course, needs to continue to win games. And is there a possibility even, say, they get to the Big Ten championship and they maybe win that to get to the college football playoff?
Yeah. I was looking at this a couple weeks ago. I think I was looking at it last week, and I was trying to figure out how there was a weird way where, even Northwestern, with them being in the other division, with Ohio State being in the precarious position that they're in now, it doesn't really matter anymore because Northwestern lost to Michigan State last week. But I was saying, like, there was a legitimate possibility where another team from the Big Ten could even be in the conversation to make the college football playoff with how highly ranked Northwestern was, and IU being in the top 10 or close to it. These rankings, really were painting these teams very favorably, and still kind of keeping keeping Ohio State in that top 4. I feel like a lot of people are going to have more and more problems with them, only playing 4 games and still being that highly ranked. You could potentially see another Big Ten team maybe sneaking in there. And if Indiana is able, I mean, I'm not saying Indiana is going to make the college football playoff, but I'm just saying that, if in a perfect world, if Indiana were to completely win out the rest of the year, they beat Wisconsin, they beat Purdue, and they go to the Big Ten championship and they win the game, Indiana could be up there as a top 5 team, in the country if everything goes exactly to plan perfectly. I don't think that's going to happen because I think Ohio State's going to have enough games, unfortunately. So I think that they're still going to be able to play because they're playing Michigan State. Ohio State is. They're playing Michigan State this week. So they should run away with that. They might win by 30 points, honestly. So we'll see what happens. Is there a way for Indiana to make it to the Big Ten championship this year more so than ever before because of the way that everything is gone? And if Ohio State can't get those games in, if something happens against Michigan, and that could happen. I mean, it might not even be Ohio State's fault. They've had all these positive tests in their own program, but Michigan has had some too. So if something happens where they can't play that game, it's going to be interesting because of the way that all of this has gone. But they have more than enough of a resume, right, where you understand what Ohio State's capable of this year. And they're probably going to be in the playoffs still if they're able to finish their season. And then you look at Indiana going against Purdue next week after they play Wisconsin this week. They're definitely in a good position to finish with a very nice record. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. You mentioned Ohio State and the lack of games they played. I really do think that should this Michigan State game happen, which looks like it will. I mean, it's Friday now. I'd be kind of surprised by a cancellation this late in the game, but I think they really need to impress the committee. I mean, their offense has been fine. Their defense, really, they need a blowout team. I think they need to blow out Michigan State, and they really need to look really good against Michigan. They need to kind of show that, hey, we're a top 4 team, by the way. Don't forget about us, even though we've only played 4 games. So I think that's what Ohio State needs to do. I think Ryan Day knows that to get back. But, and then once you're in, I mean, anything can happen, right? You just got to get in, kind of like the March Madness, similar kind of thing there. But I think Indiana's ceiling, I don't think they're going to make the college football playoff. I mean, maybe there's a very, very small chance, but I have a hard time selling it to myself that could happen. Mm-hmm. I think the ceiling for them would be like the Fiesta Bowl. New Year's 6 would be really something else for this team. Against, I've seen like a USC connection, like a Pac-12 or
that is the most likely thing.
Or
one
maybe,
of those New York, the New Year's 6 games.
Maybe like a Florida. That would be kind of a big. That would be a really cool opponent to play. A guy like a Kyle Trask who's been a Heisman candidate or something like that. Or maybe I know the non-Power 5 school usually plays in the Peach Bowl. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Even a team like a BYU, I'd be interested in watching that game this year. Yeah. With the quarterback they have there, or who knows, Coastal Carolina, which I love that Coastal Carolina and BYU agree to schedule each other. Like, I think that's great for these small teams. Like, they should do that. Like, everyone's been complaining, BYU, you haven't played anyone. And I agree. They shouldn't be ranked high if their schedule's weak. Is it their fault? No, but schedule better opponents, and they're doing it. So,
well, that's interesting because Zach Wilson at BYU is a Heisman candidate, so everybody's really excited about, what that means for them. And, everybody's been harking on the, college football playoff committee because they just don't seem to be putting any respect on them. They keep, winning. They're undefeated. They have twice as many games played as Ohio State does, and they're not even close to making it in the playoff. But a team like Texas A&M is right there knocking on the door at that 5th spot. And they're a team that if they don't make it into the playoff, which, like we said, if for whatever reason, or I guess more likely than not, Ohio State stays in there, provided that their defense doesn't completely fall apart, like you were saying, then maybe a team like A&M would be fun for Indiana to play on New Year's. And that would be interesting because now you're talking about a team that could have been in the playoff, very well could have been in the playoff. And if Indiana does well against that kind of team, it really makes you wonder. I mean, if they got in at that 4 spot, they're going against Alabama. There's really no shot. But at least they're there. That proves that they really are in that upper echelon of teams.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's a good point. Even if they do play a team like a Texas A&M, at least, hey, maybe you're building something and proving to the country. Next year you're going to get Michael Penix back. Obviously, we don't know how it'll look. I mean, that's the second time he's torn that ACL.
That'll be interesting.
But he's been good. You bring back a lot of talent. Who knows? Maybe you prove something next year, but that's yet to be seen. But first of all, none of this will have this whole question. It'd be a pipe dream if Indiana doesn't beat Wisconsin this Saturday.
That's
so
also
they have to take care of business. They have to win out definitely for any of this to happen.
And an interesting point about next season too with Penix. Of course, we want Penix to come back. Like, that is the best case scenario. But what is also great, and I don't know if you've seen the news about this, about the new quarterback recruit. You heard about him?
Are you talking about McCauley?
Yes, Donovan McCauley just moved up in the rival rankings into the top 100. He moved up 119 spots. He's a 4-star recruit, so there's certainly a lot to be excited about there. And I mean, we're not going to freak out because we're not talking about, Justin Fields or we're not talking about Trevor Lawrence here, but this is still somebody who is going to be really interesting. And, he's Penix is definitely the guy who everybody's familiar with, but at least we're going to be bringing in new guys into the program who you can be excited about going forward. And it really helps boost Indiana's recruiting profile too, because even though, they're not up there with some of these SEC schools when it comes to recruiting and even other teams in the Big Ten, they really have turned things around. And provided that Tom Allen is able to, he'll keep his job. He could get paid as much money as he wants going forward after this. But, provided that he stays and doesn't go somewhere else, where, he feels like he could turn another program around, then we'll see.
Yeah. Yep. And Dexter Williams is the backup behind Jack Tuttle at the moment. So who knows? I mean, I'd be curious to see how they look. But I guess, as we wrap up here, it's like, there is a possibility that Jack Tuttle is really good, right? And then he looks really good. And then what? What do you do if you're Tom Allen next year? I mean, you're in the same boat where it's like, okay, wow, well, Tuttle looked really good. I mean, would be crazy to think that there'd be another quarterback competition leading into the season next year? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, that's crazy to think because a lot of people were like Penix for Heisman, for a Heisman candidate this year, for a little bit there.
Yes.
Before, obviously, the Maryland game before he got hurt was poor showing by him. But
yeah,
I mean,
he was at the top of the Big Ten in passing touchdowns for a long time. So,
yeah. Well, lots to be excited about for Indiana football, Indiana basketball. That's yet to be seen, but Maui Invitational was an entertaining one to see. Brandon, thanks for putting on your IU cap there and talking some IU athletics with me today.
Definitely, Jordan. Happy for you to have me. I was very excited to talk about just the state of Hoosier athletics. It's been nice because I was so used to doing this literally every single week, whether we were covering basketball or football. And it's great now because both teams are playing at the same time. And there's really a lot of reasons to be happy. I mean, do you think Indiana basketball will get ranked at some point this season?
At some point in the season, I'd say maybe. Something's telling me no. I don't know.
They are receiving votes right now, and they're about 5 or 6 spots out. So it's not inconceivable, right?
Let's see how they look against Florida State. Okay, a ranked team. We saw how they looked against a ranked team in Texas. Didn't go well. So
yes,
we'll have to take a look there. But Brandon, thank you for coming on the Take 3 podcast. Appreciate it. Best of luck to you, and we'll hopefully talk again soon. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Yep.